What you're looking at is not a crater created by a meteorite hitting Earth, but a hole blown into the Earth by the Union Army during the Civil War. This is one of the craziest stories in U.S. history, the Battle of the Crater. Petersburg was a vital point on the rail line supplying the Confederate capital of Richmond. The Union Army wanted to get a hold of this position, and the Confederates were defending it. A siege started with 4 days of strong Union attacks on the eastern defenses of Petersburg from June 15th to the 18th of 1864. Trenches were dug by both armies. The lines between the Confederate Elliott Salient near the Blandford Church and the Union lines opposing that position were about 130 yards apart from each other. A stalemate ensued. The Union Army needed a fresh idea of how to break the line. Some members of the 48th Pennsylvania under Major General Ambrose Burnside were coal miners. One of them was Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pleasants. He proposed digging a tunnel from the bottom of the ravine near their position into the rear of the Confederate lines, filling the mine with black powder. A big explosion could break the Confederate line. The Union Army could rush in and bring an end to this war. Majors Grant and Meade had serious reservations about this plan. After long consideration, Grant and Meade agreed to go along with the plan along with Burnside. The men of the 48th Pennsylvania, along with Henry Pleasants, proceeded to dig a tunnel beneath the Confederate position near Cemetery Hill. Now, they lacked the proper tools to do their work, and they had to improvise. So they used cracker boxes and mining picks that were straightened from army picks. Somehow, rumors of the mine got out and reached the Confederate lines. General Lee did not believe this at all. But after 2 weeks, they commenced counter-mining attempts. They didn't know what they were doing and were unable to discover the mine. The mine was T-shaped. The opening of the mine was about 3 feet wide. The shaft was about 500 feet long. It started in a sunken area downhill and more than 50 feet below the Confederate battery. It made this very hard to detect. How did they get air into this mine? Well, they used a vacuum type system which sucked fresh air into the mine from the entrance using a wooden duct. This duct went the entire length of the line. At the vertical shaft's base, a fire was kept continuously burning. The fire heated the stale air inside the tunnel, drawing it up the exhaust shaft and out the mine by a chimney effect. The mine was eventually completed on July 23rd. On July 27th, they loaded 8,000 pounds of black powder at the end of the mine. The powder was arranged in 2 lateral galleys and was sandbagged to direct the explosion force upward. The men spliced 2 fuses together that formed a 98-foot line. On July 30th, 3:15 a.m. in the morning, the fuses were lit. Time passed and passed. It became quite obvious that the fuse had burned out. 2 soldiers from the 48th Pennsylvania, a lieutenant and a sergeant, volunteered to go inside and relight the fuse. These brave soldiers were very successful. At 4:44 a.m., the 8,000 pounds of gunpowder exploded under Elliott's salient. An eyewitness later wrote that he saw a huge column of dirt, dust, smoke, and flame, 200 feet high. He said, "I could see in the column of fire and smoke the bodies of men, arms and legs, pieces of timber, and a gun carriage." This created a huge crater in the ground. The crater was 170 feet long, 60 feet wide, and 30 feet deep. Major General Burnside wanted the U.S. colored troops to go in first. They were to be led by Brigadier General Edward Ferraro. However, General Meade vetoed Ferraro's division as the lead element. He feared that a potential fallout would happen if the attack failed. He thought critics might claim that they sacrificed black soldiers rather than risk white soldiers in a wild scheme that probably wouldn't succeed. Major General Burnside made a huge error. He selected a very incompetent and cowardly person, Brigadier General James Ledlie. Ledlie's division was to go first, followed by Ferraro's U.S. colored troops. Burnside was so sure that this was going to be successful, he packed his bags to enter Petersburg. Well, when the blast happened, it was immediately successful. 300 South Carolinians were killed in the explosion. But the Union troops were disorganized. They were slow. They had poor communication. And the worst of all, their leadership was pathetic. As the men entered this 30 feet deep hole, they were in disarray. Burnside's soldiers attacked towards the hole in the Confederate lines caused by this explosion. Many went down the crater until it was filled with men. Ultimately, about 15,000 Union troops occupied that hole. As I said, Ledlie attacked first, followed by Ferraro. But where were these two? They weren't in the fighting. Ferraro and Ledley were observing behind the lines in a bunker. They were drinking throughout the whole battle as their men were being decimated. Confederate General Lee sent Major General William Mahone to counterattack. He sealed this line that was caused by the explosion. The Union was repulsed by merciless counterattacks. They formed up around the crater, began firing rifles and artillery down into it on what they called a turkey shoot. They were just simply picking soldiers off. Members of the United States colored troops among the first wave of the Union attackers were the target of particularly brutal Confederate retaliation. The Confederate soldiers killed the colored troops as they were wounded, surrendering, or even being taken prisoner. After the battle, a truce was called between both sides so they could go retrieve their dead. 8 more months of trench warfare followed the Battle of the Crater. Burnside was relieved of his command for his role in this debacle. His leadership was considered one of the biggest failures in U.S. history. This action resulted in 4,000 Union casualties and only 1,800 Confederate casualties. However, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pleasants was praised for his idea and its execution. He was later appointed Brigadier General. The siege of Petersburg lasted 292 days. Well, nothing in this battle went as planned. General Grant called the Battle of the Crater the saddest affair I have witnessed in this war. Poor leadership caused a lack of communication and disarray, which led to a loss of life. This is one of the craziest battles in U.S. history. That is strange indeed. Hey, thanks for watching. We'll keep the videos coming here on Strange History. Hey, check out our video about Benedict Arnold. You're going to want to watch every minute of this intriguing story.